Hello, my name is Carolyn Cowan, and I'm talking to you today about the new Kundalini.global teacher training that I have decided to run. It is a 220-hour Yoga Alliance certified teacher training taking place in Battersea in South London, and it is 5 modules starting in February. Each module is 4 days, so it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Each of these weekends takes place in a studio in Battersea, and the studio is a couple of minutes walk, maybe 10 minutes walk from Clapham Junction station. The training weekends, 4-day weekends, include breakfast and snacks and teas and coffees, but your main meal, the lunch, you can eat out. This place is surrounded by loads of cafes. So that's kind of the details. There's payment plans on my website. Those are the really functional details for where the training's taking place and what do you need to know in terms of food and things. In terms of the reason why I am running a training, I have been teaching yoga for, I suppose, nearly 21 years, quite a long time. And my background was Kundalini yoga as taught by Yogi Bhajan. And over time, I think I have become aware that there really is a need for a way of looking at yoga through the lens of really the most exquisite of global spiritual practices. I think that there's a very profound need to bring the divine feminine into yoga. My experience as a yoga teacher is that I have a lot of men who come to my classes. Sometimes the classes are 30% men, which I think is quite high, and my experience so far is that it can be up to 1 in 10 is generally a man in a class. And as women, it's really important to ask ourselves, for whose gaze do we stand? Who is looking at us when we teach? And there's an extraordinary amount of forgotten knowledge, forgotten spiritual practice, forgotten awareness of the divine feminine. It doesn't seem to come into any yogic teachings, as far as I'm aware, in the ancient lineages and practice of yoga, which I profoundly bow to. But as a trauma therapist, as an anxiety therapist, as a specialist in addiction, amongst other things, and pre- and postnatal issues, we, as women, we need to be addressed. We need to relate to the most divine and exquisite aspects of ourselves that perhaps are not always the male gaze. Perhaps, actually, if we could get in touch with the power of our own history, the power of our story, and these other female deities that do actually represent so much in our history and in our nature. So that's an aspect. Another aspect is that as a teacher, I am aware that I have people who come to my classes who may be Muslim. I have people who are Christian. I have people who are agnostics and atheists, and yet they can access, through the way that I approach teaching yoga, a very profound and deep experience of a relationship to the divine in whatever form they believe it to be. And I think that that's important to recognize that in all religious and spiritual practice, including shamanism, there are some extraordinary rituals and ceremonies and practices that can really link us into a much deeper relationship to our purpose, to our, perhaps to reframe our story in a different way. And so this is another thing that I want to bring. I think that in all the years of being a teacher, I'm very aware that most people come to yoga because they're unhappy, and they don't necessarily come because they look good in leggings. And I think people come to yoga, particularly perhaps Kundalini yoga, because they want to learn to experience themselves differently. And I think that as a teacher, and as a teacher trainer, one of my gifts really is imparting an awareness of how to work with the nervous system, how to work with the negative mind, and how to create a sense of balance within the self. And I don't mean balance in what you eat, or I don't mean balance in your work life. I actually mean that we can feel really seriously out of kilter. We can feel extremely anxious in our physical and emotional body. And how do we address that as teachers? How do we learn to reframe ourselves? So this is another aspect of what I believe needs to be done in teacher training. I will also be looking at an equality and a balance in an awareness of gender identity. So this means gender identity means how people identify themselves and the religious and sometimes very strong spiritual judgments that are made about this. And I think that to open the class up to be more inclusive and to understand how to address this is really important. Gender preference, I think that this is another thing that we really need to pay attention to continue to align the world to this heteronormative binary of you're a man, therefore you should be in love with a woman, or you're a woman, therefore where's your husband? It slightly drives me crazy. It's the 21st century. Well, the world is not like that anymore. Gender preference, gender identity and gender representation have become very key issues. And I think that they're not being brought into the yoga room enough with an awareness that is kind and generous and inclusive. So I really want to be able to address that. My own experience of being overtly homosexually conscious and my gender preference has got me into a lot of trouble over the years, and it's time to really address that. I think for all people, for all teachers, to be able to be inclusive is really important. And then I think to understand the power of yoga isn't just for people who can afford to go to Bali and look fabulous on a beach and have someone else say, take a picture of me praying, or take a picture of me meditating, or take a picture of me doing this really fantastically difficult picture. I think that the power of yoga to help us deal with depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, negative history, potentially all the way through to a physical response to trauma in the body. I feel that all these things mean that the yoga room should be way more inclusive, way more inclusive. And what does that mean in terms of how we present ourselves as teachers, but also how do we learn to adjust and accept that the potential group is bigger than the kind of social media, Instagram size 8. How do we deal with somebody who comes in the room who may have really serious back issues, neck issues? They may not be conforming to our general social media-based perceptions of body size. How do we help them adjust postures? How do we give them the breadth of experience that we know we can have if we happen to be more fortunate with how we can move our bodies physically? A lot of words about a training that I'm really proud to be running. I'm writing the manual from scratch, completely from scratch. And so my specializations include the anxiety body, hormones, hormonal flow, adjusting hormonal flow, the esoterics of posture, and the power of intention, and looking at yoga through the lens of the quantum field, the power of our intention. What are we doing? What are we believing about ourselves? Where are we tripping ourselves up? And how do we change that? So if you're thinking of doing this training, my intention is that I will teach you to be a really seriously excellent teacher, an open-minded, supportive and well-boundaried teacher with an extraordinary range of knowledge. And the people that I'm bringing in to teach with me are the top in their field. You may not know who they are in terms of their names when you look them up on the website, but they're people who, for me, I really am proud to stand beside in terms of religious awareness, spiritual awareness, posture, the body, and various other practices like shamanism. So have a look at the website, Kundalini.global.co.uk. It starts in February. Let's change this big field of yoga.